Your agency will live or die by your retention. We've now been the CFOs on over 50 agencies, and we oversee over $100 million in revenue. And if there's one thing that's true, is that no agency will scale if their retention isn't rock solid. Because you might get to like 100K a month. We've seen some agencies push to 200K a month with bad retention, but at some point, you're just unable to offset the churn that you have with new sales. Or if you're able to, it is a very shitty existence because all you're doing is dealing with client fires and spending money on sales or marketing, trying to close deals just to replace what you're losing. That is why in this video, I'm going over a case study from us where we helped one of our agency clients halve their churn from 17% on average to below 10%. And in here, I'll cover exactly what we did so that you can also look at this and see for yourself if you're already doing this or if these might be levers that you can pull as well in order to lower your churn and have a higher retention and a better agency and a better life. So let's get into it. So this agency lost 17% of their clients every single month. Just imagine how hard that is to offset. So what it looked like in practice was that they were losing on average over 20K a month because they were doing 1.5 million a year as a paid ads agency. And so now we got this down to 10K a month, even less in some months. That's what you can see here in this chart. Most months they were losing like 17, even up to 20% of their client base, which is an incredibly high number. And now after implementing these findings, they got this down to below 10% and or like around 10K a month in churn. And so just imagine the impact this has over the course of an entire year, because it's not just a 10K saving that happens once. This is the retention that compounds every single month. As like you retain more of your clients, they pay another month and then you lose fewer clients again. And so this stacks up to hundreds of thousands in additional revenue and profit every single year. Plus, it means you have to spend less on sales, which is a great thing. So in order to get results like this, the first thing you must always do is look at the data. So what we did for them is we collected the reasons why clients were leaving. And this was a very surprising one, and one that's always different for every agency we look at. But in their case, it was actually kind of a good thing because this was an easy one to fix. What we saw was that most of the clients who left were either leaving because of bad communication, like they just didn't feel that they were really being taken care of well, or they were leaving because of slow results, like kind of linked to bad communication. Like they just didn't feel stuff was really happening for them. Because when you look at like poor performance, which is like one that's a bit harder to fix, this was actually not too bad for them. Like 21%, yeah, we can get it down a little bit, but poor performance wasn't the main reason they were leaving. Also, bad fit wasn't too bad, and like them taking stuff in-house also wasn't like too common. So it's really the communication that turned out to be their main bottleneck. And so that's what showed here, like nearly 60% left because of this, either communication or speed, or really just the surface part of being an agency, not the main results that they were getting. So fixing this, one, going deep on tracking churn. This starts by looking at those reasons, but it goes much deeper than this. When we take an agency and we want to like figure out how we can lower that churn as their CFO and finance team, this is what we look at. First, we look at how many clients are actually leaving, and we contrast this against the MRR that are leaving. Because what many don't understand is that there can be good churn as well. And we've seen this with clients, where maybe their client count churn is very high, but their MRR churn is low. And so this means that they are losing a lot of clients, but they are losing the small ones, which can be a good thing if you're capacity constrained, because this now means that you free up spots for the bigger clients to come in. So very important, look at client count and MRR count. Then we want to understand where the churn is coming from. So we look at this by account manager and by pod. This tells us like, is it just like a company issue, or might we just have some account manager training, or that might need to be replaced? Maybe they're in the wrong role, or maybe there's certain pods that just aren't hitting it, whereas other pods are crushing it. If we split this out at a higher level of detail, we know exactly where to look. Then we look at it by cohort. So this is also one that almost no agency looks at, and it's so incredibly valuable. And that is looking at like a cohort of like, when does the agency start? By which months do they actually leave? And so we see sometimes with clients, and that's what we're going to see here, that the churn happens in the first couple months. Whereas with other clients, this might happen only after 6 months or after 12 months. And so identifying where in like your lifetime with a client, the highest churn happens, that is incredibly valuable because now you can do something about it and you can put certain things in place. When the client hits, that 3 months anniversary with you, you can put something in place to like make sure that they get like an extra little boost of value or a better service at that point, so that they like, stay beyond that point. So cohort, incredibly important. We're going to cover this a little bit more down the line. And then last one, this is what we started with, the reason. If you're not even capturing the reason, even if you just have to allocate this yourself, like you as the founder should still have like a finger on the pulse to understand like why are clients leaving? Like, hey, did we just get shitty results for them or we're not hitting KPIs? Or do I just like see the Slack channels empty, like clients were just like constantly following up, they didn't really get communication from the team? Like you can figure out the reason, but if possible, it's even better to have like an exit interview with the clients to understand like why they actually left. Very important to track all this stuff. And so that is like exactly what like we saw here when we looked at it per cohort, is that it really was in the first 3 months that clients were leaving. Once they stayed beyond 3 months, they pretty much all just retained for like over 9 months, a bit of churn here and there, but it really was like this churn and burn effect where clients come in, they're excited, and then it's a disappointing experience and they just leave. They don't even want to write this out. That is then what tells us exactly why we need to put the focus. Which leads us to point 2, putting a CSM in every pot. Now, this is exactly where playbooks are useless. And even where I go as far to say, like most agency coaches or gurus aren't that useful because they don't know your business in depth. Like they don't have the data. And so like just claiming like, oh, you need to have a CSM, you need to hire more people, you need to have like always have an account manager. It's simply not true. Because if this agency was only churning clients because they just couldn't hit KPIs, then we would have invested in better media buyers, into better growth strategists. But that wasn't their issues. Like their media buying was fine. The issue was in their account managers. That's why we had the CSM. And so that's what we saw here. Like how this agency was structured was just like very heavy on media buying, and they had like one more like a project manager was the official title, who was sort of overseeing the clients, more just looking at like, hey, is the onboarding completed, are tasks being completed, but they weren't like client facing in a way a CSM was. So what we discussed with them and what we worked out from the numbers is that if we place a CSM in every pot that would actually own the client relationship, that even if that CSM could just reduce churn by a couple percent, that would have a massive impact on the bottom line. And so we found that like paying a CSM $5K a month, which is a pretty reasonable salary for like a non-US CSM or more of a junior CSM from the US. In their case, they hired out of the US. That was like a very, very high ROI investment, because this is directly the thing that fixed the biggest bottleneck, which was the retention. But we took it one step further than just placing a CSM, because what we also found was that there was a lot of churn that happened around the billing cycles. And so what this agency was doing, they were just manually billing the client for both the base fees and the performance fees every single month. And so what we saw is, one, this was just very manual. And so from a finance perspective, it was a waste of time. But what also happened here is that especially in those first couple months, as the clients were not getting a good service and they were just getting their invoice every month, it just left a bad taste in their mouth. And that was often the point where they're like, hey, actually, this isn't really working, I'm going to leave. And so what we did here is that we automated their base fees and only did a manual invoice once the performance fee was hit. Because especially in those first couple months, they rarely hit the performance fees as they were still scaling up the account, getting everything in place. And so now the base fee could just be a nice auto charge based on the recurring subscription that just happened. And then only once performance fees were hit, which is often when the clients were happier because performance was good, that's when they would get like an extra notification of like, hey, you have to pay this invoice. So this actually greatly reduced the touch points we had with clients, especially ones that are a little bit more negative of like, hey, you have to pay me. And it just made sure they got paid and they could actually focus on getting the results while the CSM was focusing on the relationship. Then step 4. This was really the final nail in the coffin to hammer down this first 90-day churn issue. And that is where we like discuss with their sales team to have like a very clear commitment in the pitch. And so what we said here is that, we don't have to do any like full lock-ins in the contracts, but frame the pitch as a 90-day starting point of the service. Like it is still month to month, but really set the tone that it will take 90 days to get results, to get everything going. And then after that, that is when, they have a lot more visibility. They know actually if this works or not. But they just need to have that initial bit of time so they can really get things going. And just having that in the communication, like framing the clients that this is a long-term partnership, that is what kind of got it out of their heads, that they're not just judging performance in the first couple weeks, but they really see this as like a longer partnership where they can grow together. And so just making that as a frame really helped reduce those initial frustrations with the clients. And that is all that was needed here to halve their churn and actually help this agency scale again. So I've no doubt these guys are going to 3 million a year now. And this is exactly what happens when good operators get good data. So that's your homework for this video. Take a look at your own numbers. What is your retention? Can you already see how your churn is split by all these different categories that we talked about? Your clients, your MRR, your account managers, your pods, your cohorts, and by the reasons. If you can't see this, either work it out yourself, or of course, you can message me. We love to set this up for you and help you also improve your retention and scale your agency. So you can book a call with me directly here in the comments, or you can just send me a message on any of the socials. See you in the next video.